Hello, my name is Nicole Holder and I'm the Cultural Arts Center Gallery Manager. Welcome to 2021's Whitewater Arts Alliance Virtual Members Show. 19 artists are displaying 60 pieces in the virtual show and 18 artists with 56 pieces are here in the CAC. You can view the virtual show at whitewaterarts.org/members-show-2021. You can vote in the Viewer's Choice Award in gallery or online at whitewaterarts.org/online-viewer-vote. You can vote for up to 3 pieces. The 3 pieces with the most votes will be selected to become greeting cards for next year. We would like to thank all of our supporters, viewers, sponsors, and members that make this show possible and provide arts to our community. Enjoy the virtual reception. This piece is Shall We Dance by Marianne Gerlack, and I love the story that's being told in this piece. It provides a little moment of escapism just to imagine what these characters are doing, how they're interacting, imagining how the situation unfolds from here. And it's in a beautiful setting. It was a really great use of color, and it's a lot of fun to look at and think about. All right, this piece is Definition, pair number 2 by Carolyn Alexander, and there are a few things that I love about this piece. One of them is the dynamic use of line width and weight. There are some areas where there's no lines at all, where she uses color to show the outline of the form, and there are others where the line is incredibly thick to show that weight, and it's an incredible use of line that not all artists use. And I love the color choices to really magnify those natural colors you might see in a pair. And she has a lot of different definitions that could help define a pair. For example, sour, I see in there. So it's fun to look at all the different definitions she's incorporated and also the artistic techniques she's used to bring attention to a beautiful pair. This piece is Parting Grace by John D. Kopler, and there are a few things that I love about it. One is I love the technique he's used to show the foliage of the trees. There's such a combination of colors, and that like splatter effect that he used works so well to show those differences and those changes of color in this kind of season. And I also really enjoy the effect that he has on the ground as well. I'm not sure if it was intentional, but it reminds me a lot of stained glass, which is great for the content of this piece because it does feature a church. So I think the composition, the technique, overall it's very well tied together, and I think it's wonderfully done.
Dawn Hunter is a retired art teacher and elementary educator who works in collage and found object assemblage. She has 3 pieces displayed in this show. Dawn starts the process with either a subject in mind or simple marks on paper until it evolves while she adds more variety of materials. Ideas are fast and furious to her, sometimes taking her focus away and seems to create an explosion upon the canvas. However, she follows a sign that she has within her studio for such messes. Creative people don't have a mess. They have ideas lying around everywhere. Art is therapy to Dawn. This was especially helpful during COVID-19, as while everything else seemed out of control, her art stayed in focus. Due to this, it has offered Dawn the opportunity to experiment like never before. She has been using Tyvek, plastic insulation material, by applying paint, heating, and then reshaping it. It is then applied to landscapes, often forming rock-like pieces. Dawn has been a founding member of the Whitewater Arts Alliance and was the first president. To her, art is essential to the growth and health of community, and that is the reason why she has remained a member.
This piece is Autumn View by Dawn Hunter, and there's a few things I really love about this piece. One is I love that she's brought the viewer's attention towards the top of this piece and that there's a lot of negative space, and it's like an interesting kind of ratio that not everyone will employ in their art, and I find it very visually interesting, as well as the combination of colors that she's used, just small little highlights of cool colors in this overwhelmingly warm colored piece. Gives you a lot to look at. There's a lot of different textures. There's this gritty texture in here, and smooth, bubbly texture. And it draws attention to a beautiful landscape, but also all those layers underneath that you wouldn't usually think about when looking at a landscape. So it's a lot of fun to think about. This piece is What Comes Next by Santovic, and it highlights a lot of journalism titles from our experience in the pandemic. And, you know, we're in the middle of it still now, but I imagine decades from now, it'll be really important to look back and see these striking headlines, remembering what it was like to go through this as we are now. And something I appreciate about it as well is that there's a small piece down here that gives me a little bit of hope, almost, of rebuilding America, renewal and hope. And so it's not just a summary of everything we've experienced with the pandemic, but also brings the viewer to think about how do we move forward from here. All right, this piece is Exploring Lake Wisdom by Virginia Epps, and there's a lot of reasons that this is my favorite of hers for this show. One is that it's a waterscape from bird's eye view, and you don't often see art that isn't photography that's from a bird's eye view, so that's a lot of fun. And I love her incorporation of so many different materials. Such an interesting way to think about how she wanted to portray all these different pieces of the landscape, thinking about what she used to represent different things. And it's a great use of color as well. She has a lot of small colored details to help move you through these large patches of brown that are probably pretty overwhelming when it's not abstracted. And there's so much attention to detail. She has little bits of flowing water going into the lake here, and it's just a lot of fun and really well done. This piece is I'm Fine, Fallacy of a Smile by Mary J. Abbott. I'm really glad this piece is in the show because we don't have a lot of sculpture. And I was talking to the artist before about her hands. I was wondering if they were casted or sculpted because it's kind of hard to tell, and she said they are indeed sculpted. So there's a lot of attention to detail, really well rendered hands, even small details like the fingernails and the creases in the palm. And she specifically mentioned too that she wanted the hands to appear androgynous, which is a very intentional choice that I appreciate. And there's a mask here, which upon first glance might not seem like a mask, it might just be a human face. But as we come around to the back, you're seeing that it's actually concealing a lot of other content. There's a lot of emotions going back here that weren't originally noticeable to the viewer. So it's a really great concept, and I think it's a feeling that like most people or viewers can relate to on some level. So it's a very universal and understandable concept that's really well rendered and really well done. This piece is Couple by Craig Eade, and similar to a piece I mentioned before, this one uses a great line weight to represent the figures. For example, in the highlighted areas, there's very shallow lines, and in the heavier areas, very thick, dense lines, which is really great. And I love the contrast in this piece as well. Very easy to view from a distance and understand all the different parts of the figure. And there's a lot of visual interest with the staring of the two people in this picture, and it draws the eye, as well as in this piece here where one of the people in the couple is staring at the viewer. Really helps draw you in, helps you to consider what the relationship is in this couple, and it's really well rendered as well. All right, this piece is Whimsy by Sylvia Linton, and one thing I love about this piece is that it uses the entire spectrum of color from red to violet, and that can be really challenging to do with watercolor and not make it turn out like a brown or undesirable color. So that shows really great technique there and talent. And I love the movement through the piece with the change in forms with the dotted lines and the stippling and the wispy bits there. And I also love that the paint has a bit of a shiny quality to it, which just is a preference of mine. It makes it very fun to look at. So this piece is Fairy Awakening by Rory Schmidt, and I really love the artist's interpretation of this moment because it features either a girl or a woman, it's a little hard to tell, with fairy wings on, and usually that would be a very tender, fantastical moment, and the way that the artist has interpreted it in this photo is more of like a dramatic and dynamic sense. It makes it very beautiful, and there's so many elements in here to look at beyond just the person in the photo, and the dramatic lighting and everything else that's been incorporated makes it a very interesting piece. This is Ocean Solitaire 1 by Terry Tutton, and there's a few bits of this piece that I really enjoy. One is I loved his technique for expressing the ocean. They are very simple lines up close, but from a distance they're very effective. And that's pretty incredible when you can use less work to make something look like well rendered. So that's really wonderful. And I love his incorporation of small colors in here that I didn't notice before. So up close there's also a lot of detail going on that you don't notice from afar. So from both far away and up close, it's an interesting piece to look at. And I love his attention to detail in the ship as well, with all of the ropes and the small birds flying around. You can see some figures on the ship. Just a great attention to detail and great use of technique for this piece.
Marilyn Furstenberg is a watercolor artist and retired child protective social worker. She works exclusively in watercolor. Currently, she has 4 pieces in the show. Marilyn paints what she loves and has a variety of subjects to adore. Flowers are among the objects she always enjoys. She likes their colors, fragrance, and graceful beauty as they stand growing in nature. She often paints them larger than life. In recent projects, she has begun to paint people. Her work, WFD Controlled Burn, tells the story of hard-working first responders. When painting, Marilyn loves to see a piece of paper emerge into something new. All during her COVID stay at home, she painted 85 illustrations drawn by another artist for a book entitled Father Wore a Pink Vest. Marilyn is a member of the Whitewater Arts Alliance as it fills a void and gives artists an opportunity to mingle and learn from one another. She grew up in Whitewater, and through the years she has watched her community grow, especially the WAA from when it was first established.
Alright, so my favorite piece from Marilyn Furstenberg is Purple Iris. And I love it for a few reasons. One is that the purple color is incredibly rich, which is sometimes hard to do with watercolor. Sometimes it's a little more faded or a little more neutral color. And there's a lot of subtleties in her use of color too, like where the lights versus shadows are hitting. There are a lot of different details there, and the incredible attention to detail on the veins of the leaves and of the petals of the flower. So I just think she really did a great job paying attention to detail and rendering it really well. Alright, so this piece is Boxing Rabbits by Amy Way, and this one's my favorite for a few reasons. For one, I think there's good contrast between the subject matter, which is the rabbits, and their background. And the background's very colorful and beautiful, and it has like a cartoon kind of design in some of the mosaic pieces, and that gives it just a very fun atmosphere. And there's so much visual interest with this piece because there's such a variety of materials that she used. There's a keyhole, there's door hinges, a screwdriver. Some of these things I'm not even sure what they are. So it's very fun to look at. This one is my favorite from Jeff McDonald for a few reasons. This is Carnes Park IR Study, and I love the black and white sky. There's so much contrast, and it really changes the feeling that the photo gives you, and kind of the whitewashed effect that he's put on the picture adds a lot of visual interest, and the lines that kind of bring your eyes through the piece visually keeps it very interesting to look at as a subject, even though it might be something that we see every day here in rural Wisconsin. The artist has used a lot of techniques to make it a very visually interesting subject and to capture your interest. This piece is Little Blue Heron by Everett Long, and I really appreciate the challenging content of this picture. It's always difficult to capture wildlife because they can move unexpectedly, and this wildlife is in the water, and sometimes the reflection of the water can be an issue with photography, getting the lighting right, and the colors are beautiful, and you know, the animal and his face just really draws you in, and I love the composition of the piece, the color, and it's really well done. Okay, this piece is a photo by Michael J. Havis titled Ruthless, and this is my favorite of his pieces in this show for a few reasons. One is I love the expression on the model's face. It's very engaging as a viewer to look at her expression. It really draws you in from across the room. I also love the different fabrics that she's wearing, the velvet versus the leather, adds some color and like texture difference that's interesting to look at, and could also be challenging from a photographer perspective too, because they reflect or absorb light differently. And her pose is also really dynamic, which helps move your eye through the piece and captures your attention. So I enjoy a lot about this piece. All right, so this is a 3-part series by Nick S. Chapelcar, and my favorite of the series here at the bottom is Looking North. And there's something about just nature photography that gives you that very calm and peaceful feeling. At least it does for me when you're out in nature. It just reminds you of what it feels to be in that kind of setting. He did a great job with the composition by framing the piece with the trees in the foreground. It almost gives me a sense of like exploration and journey with that difference in distance with the foreground and the background and the forest on the lake. It's just beautiful to look at, and it's a nice calming relief in an environment where we might not experience that often. This piece is a photo by Kathy Gibbs called Relics of the Past, and what I love about it is the dynamic way that all the pieces are interacting with each other. I'm not sure if the artist set up this photo herself or if she found these wagons sitting this way, but it really, that like potential energy there with the way that these seem like precariously stacked just makes me think about and look at this piece for longer. And it's also interesting to bring your attention to history. Like, I didn't recognize that a lot of wagons were used with newspapers. So it's fun to think about something that we wouldn't otherwise if the artist hadn't featured it in their art. This piece by Ken Marsden is called Family Farming, and it's a great watercolor, and it's my favorite of the ones he's submitted for this show for a few reasons. One is I love the attention to detail, looking at little spots like the windows and the tiles on the roof, and the contrast of the light sky and the dark shadows is really visually striking. And I also love the small details, like the individual small branches and the trees are really well done, really well rendered. And I love the colors and the techniques he's used to show the foliage in the picture as well. And then of course the cows and their expression, their view, looking at the viewer, really draws you in as well. So it's a really well done piece. And the pieces that I talked about today are just my favorites. There are many more pieces from these wonderful artists to see in this show. Thank you for watching, and remember to vote for your favorites online at whitewaterarts.org/online-viewer-vote. Happy holidays!